mainly in order to satisfy the requirement of a customer, we have to write a code. So that code is nothing but what? Programming. If I come to the function 1 and function 2, these two functions individually will going to perform a unique task. I can change the conditions, I can restrict the number of looping. So all those are modifications are easy when we are having this structured programming. Hello everybody, a warm welcome to one and all. Welcome back to the session 5 of Unit 3, and we are in the B.C.A 6th semester subject called Software Engineering. I am Rohini TS, Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. So before getting into our today's session, we'll just have a quick recap of my previous session. So in the last session of this unit, so we have learned regarding this design verification. There we got to know that what do you mean by verification, and also we have learned the difference between verification and validation process. Along with that, I have discussed regarding verification process as well as validation process, and also we got to know the advantages of those two. So till now what we have learned, feasibility study over, then we have gathered the requirement, and also we have to differentiate the requirement, whether it is functional, non-functional, everything got over. So once the requirement are gathered, then it will needs to be analyzed. Analysis is also done. After that, that analyzed document needs to be converted into some design part. That what we have learned in the design section, right? And we also got to know that what are the methodologies we have in order to do the design and how design process must be. That and all we have learned till now. So now it's a time to convert the designing or structured analyzed requirements which is given by the customer to some programming language. So then we are going to call that phase as a coding. That is what we will be learning in our today's session. So we'll see what do you mean by coding and what are the programming structures we have and what are the types of coding that we have. So when it comes to the coding, there we have to concentrate on the top-down approach, and also we have a bottom-up approach. Then we have structured coding or structured programming. This is what the three types we have in coding, along with the information hiding. So mainly to have a confidentiality, that hiding of information is also going to be important. So that is what we will be learning in our today's session. So in our today's session, we're going to see what is coding, what you mean by top-down approach, bottom-up approach, along with a structured programming. We'll see now what you mean by coding or what is programming moreover. So that here programming refers to the method of creating a sequence of instruction. So we are building a sequence of instruction. To whom we are writing this? In order to make the computer to perform a task. So mainly in order to satisfy the requirement of a customer, we have to write a code. So that code is nothing but what? Programming. So here we are writing a sequence of instruction. That is what? Code here mainly to make that computer active in order to perform a intended task. That process is called as what? Programming. And also this will going to be done, that means programming or coding of that converted design to some programming languages will going to be done by the development team by developing a logic and then writing the instruction in programming language. So here as we all know that computer doesn't know, like it will not able to understand English or any other language. So what we have to do, so whatever we are writing in a programming language as per the syntax and semantics, based on that it will be converted into its machine level language. Then only computer will be able to understand. So here in the programming, in order to have a logic or in order to write the instruction, we are going to use a programming language. And also we have various types of programming languages in order to make the computer to work in order to perform a particular task. So here you can see that programming practice refers to the way of writing a program and used along with coding style guidelines. So here mainly we have to concentrate on what do you mean by programming practice. What it means? So here we are using some programming languages to make the computer to work as per our requirements, and also this is one of the way of writing a program practice, in the sense it's a way of writing a program by using and by understanding the guidelines of programming. We have to follow the syntax and semantics of a particular programming language. Then if you are writing a programming by making use of that guidelines, then we can say that practice as what? Programming practice. And also we have some of the example here that include top-down programming, and also we have a bottom-up programming, then we have a structured programming, along with that we have a information hiding. We'll see the first one, that is regarding top-down programming. So before that, here you can see how this coding will going to work. Mainly in order to have a programming practice, so in this programming practice it can be top-down programming, and it can be bottom-up programming, and also it can be structured programming. Apart from that, even it can be information hiding. So this top-down programming is related to the structured programming. In the structured programming, it follows the top-down approach, and also we have a information hiding. So it will going to be in the terms of bottom-up programming. So these are the different practices or a programming practices that we have in order to write a code or in order to write a program to make the computer work as per the requirements of a user. So here you can see the first type, that is regarding top-down programming. As the name indicates, top-down. So here in the first level or in the highest level of hierarchy, there we are going to have main component that will going to be divided into number of sub-components or modules. So then that is what the reason we are also call this top-down approach as a modular programming. So here we are not considering a problem as or program as a single unit. Instead of that, we are dividing that into number of sub-programs or a sub-modules. Then it will be easy to maintain all the manageable pieces. That is why we are calling this top-down approach or top-down programming as a modular programming also. So that it mainly focuses on the use of modules. That is what the reason we are calling this top-down approach or a programming as a modular programming. So here what we are going to do in a top-down approach, so the program is broken up into small modules so that it is easy to trace a particular segment of code in the software program. So here first we have a main function. So in that main function, it will going to have a number of function. Let me consider function 1, and also it will going to include function 2, and it will going to perform a particular task like this. Okay, so in this what we are going to have, we are dividing a problem into number of sub modules or a sub functions. Then it will be and each function is able to have its own task. So all these different functions or different modules are easy to manage. That is what the reason, and it will be easy to trace a particular segment of code in the software program. So if you are writing a code for a software program, it can't be only 10 or 15 lines of code. It will going to be a large number of code segment will be there. So in order to make it manageable pieces, we have to do this modular approach. So that modules at the top level are those that perform the general task and proceed to other modules to perform a particular task. As I told earlier, main function. So here it will be considered as what? Top level task or top level module that will going to perform a general task. It will be general for all other function. But if I come to the function 1 and function 2, these two function individually will going to perform a unique task. So function 1, whatever it's performing, will not going to be performed by function 2. All these functions have its own potentiality to produce a particular task. So that is what we are doing in the top-down approach. And also each module is based on the functionality of its functions and procedures. And also in the programming begins from the top level hierarchy and progress towards the lower levels. So if you see this example here, it will going to start execution from the top level to the further levels, that is in the top-down approach. And also the implementation of module starts with a main module. That is what here we have a main function. So wherever we have a main function in this top-down programming, from there only program will going to start its execution. So if I wanted to execute function 1, then first it has to reach to the main function. So that implementation will going to be starts with a main function. And also after the implementation of the main module, the subordinate modules are implemented and the progress follows in this way. So here main function will going to be implemented first. After that they will come to the function 1 and it will going to perform its own task. Then once it got over, then it will come to the function 2 like this. And at last we are going to close the main function. So it will be comes with the first level, then subordinate level will going to be follows in the furthermore levels. So this is what we have learnt in the top-down programming. And also in this top-down programming, there is a risk of implementing a data structure as the modules are dependent on each other and they have to share one or more functions and procedures. So what we have in a function 1 and function 2 may be related to each other, or it may dependent on one another. So that somehow it will be complex or risk while implementing that, mainly to share one or more functions and procedures. So when we have a main function, under that I have 5 function, you just imagine, under that I have 5 function, and F1, that is a function 1 is related to function 2, may be related to function 2 or 3. So when there is a dependency between one module to another module, at that time there will be a risk of doing the implementation, and also here it has to share one or more functions and procedure to share the data from one module to another module. And also the functions and procedures are globally visible. It is publicly available, so that then only you can have a sharing of messages or the whatever the content that we have in a particular module. So that in addition to that, top-down programming uses sequences and nested levels of commands. So already I told you, right, it will going to include sequences or nested level of commands. So one command will going to be incorporated within another command. So first we have a main function, under that we have a function 1, function 2 and all other sub functions or sub modules that we have in the top-down programming. So next we have a bottom-up programming. It is just a reverse of this top-down approach. So in this bottom-up programming, it refers to the style of programming where an application is constructed with a description of modules. So if you consider the top-down approach, it will be like this. First, in the top level, it will going to perform the general task, but when it comes to the next and next level, at that time it will going to be more detailed one. This is top-down, but in the bottom-up approach, it is just a reverse to that. So in this, first we have a generalized model. So by taking all these model, I can find a solution for another module, and by integrating all the generalized model, we can get the solution for a specific task. This is in the bottom-up approach. So that in this, mainly where an application is constructed with a description of modules. So here already we had a description for a modules. By just picking that, we are grouping all those together to find the solution for our complex task, which is at the last level. So in this bottom-up approach, the description begins at the bottom of the hierarchy of modules. So here, from here, the description of particular modules or a sub-function will going to be started. Along with that, progresses through higher levels until it reaches to the top. So it will going to be split into number of other modules when it reaches to the top level. So mainly it is just like a opposite to the top-down approach, and the program modules are more general and reusable than the top-down programming, dear students. For this reason only we are using bottom-up approach than the top-down approach, mainly for the purpose of reusability. Why? Because it's more of general. It's not specific to particular task or a particular application. So in this top-down approach, we are going to do this for a particular reason or for a particular task. But here it is of more general in nature, so that we can reusable in the any other functions or application development. That is what the difference between top-down programming as well as bottom-up programming. And also it will be easier to construct functions in the bottom-up manner. It's of more general and it will going to perform more than one task at a time. So it will be easy for the reusability. No need to write it from scratch again. So it will be easier to do the construction of that particular functions in a bottom-up programming. And also bottom-up programming requires a way of passing a complicated arguments between the functions. So here in the bottom-up approach, we are passing the complicated functions or parameters or arguments between the functions. And also it takes the form of constructing the abstract data types in languages. So in the bottom-up approach, by making use of this bottom-up approach in the C++ or Java, then we can create our abstract data type. And also in the bottom-up approach, it is easier to construct the function. So in this bottom-up approach, we can easily create the function. Why? Because it's of more general. It's not performing a specific task. So if it is more general, then no need to write it again and again if I wanted to use it in any other program or a software development, so that it will be easier to construct the function. And also this is because the bottom-up programming requires a way of passing complicated arguments between the functions. So here we are passing the complicated arguments or parameters between the functions by making use of this bottom-up practice or a programming. And also in the programming languages called C++ or Java, which is of object-oriented programming languages. So there we can have this bottom-up programming in order to construct the abstracting data types of a language called C++ or in the Java. And why we are going to use this abstract data type? Mainly to implement an entire class of applications and not only one that is to be written. So here it is of more general. We are not performing any task for a particular task. Instead of that, it will be a construction or implementation of a entire class of a application. So here we are going to use a concept of classes and objects so that we can create any number of objects for a particular class, and each class will going to have its own data members and member function, and that member functions or a methods or a behavior can be used anywhere in a other program, even in the same program, more than one. So that is what the reason it will be of more easier to add new features in a bottom-up approach than in the top-down programming approach. That is what the reason we are using this bottom-up approach most of the time than the top-down programming. And also here next we have a structured programming. So for C program can be considered in the top-down programming, and C++ or Java can be considered in the bottom-up programming, and here we have Ada, Pascal, all those comes under this structured programming. As the name indicate, it is of structure. It has to strictly follow set of syntax as well as the semantics when we are writing a program. So moreover, it will be concerned with the structures which is used in the computer program. And also the structures of computer program comprises of decision, sequence as well as looping. So here mainly it comprises of three components. One is decision making. For that we are going to use a if-else statement or any conditional statement. That is what decision making. And also we have a sequence. For example, if I have a 5 set of instructions or a 5 lines of code, at the time I have to execute the first statement, then I can come to the second statement. That will be of sequential in nature. And also we have a loop. If you wanted to repeat a same set of instruction more than one time, then we have to go with this looping. So when we are having all these three components while doing a programming, then it comes in the category of structured programming. So that in the decision structures are used for conditional execution of a statement. For example, if statement. So if temperature is lesser than 20, then we are going to follow certain set of statement, else it will follow certain other set of statement. So what it means? Only if the condition is true, then it follows the true part. So if the condition is false, then it will going to follow another set of statement. That is what. So we are making a decision based on a particular condition. So for that type of programming also, we have to go with this structured programming. And next we have a sequence structure. So in this, it will be used for the sequentially executable statement. So for example, if I have 5 lines of statement, at the time, first this statement needs to be executed. After that, I have to come to the next statement. So if I wanted to reach at the last, then it should be sequential in nature, one after another statement to be executed. And also at last, we have a loop structure. So as I told earlier, loop in the sense what? It will going to be repeating. The set of statements are repeating again and again until some condition gets satisfied. So that are used for performing some repetitive task in the programming. So for example, if you wanted to execute the 1 to 10 numbers, at the time the loop has to repeat 10 times. So in order to generate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up to 10, that is what, when we wanted to perform any repetitive task in a programming, then we have to go with this loop structure. So that this structured programming will going to include decision making or a conditional statement, and also it has a sequence of statement, then it includes looping structure. So that it mainly forces a logical structure in the program to be written in an efficient and understandable manner. So whenever we are using this structured programming approach, at the time it should be confusions free or unambiguous, it must be, so that it mainly focuses on the logical structure of a programming. So when we are writing that, it must be efficient as well as should be in understandable manner. And also main purpose of having this structured programming is to make the software code easy to modify when required. So I can change the conditions, I can restrict the number of looping. So all those modifications are easy when we are having this structured programming. And what are the example that we can consider for this structured programming? It is of ADA, and next we have a Pascal and D-base. So these are the examples with features that implement the logical programming structure in the software code. All these three are the examples. So if you know more programming languages with respect to the structured programming, and also we have a top-down and bottom-up programming. So if you got to know regarding any of the examples with respect to all these three programming structures, you let me know in the comment section. So next, and also in this structured programming, so whenever we are using now structured programming, that comprises of looping, and also we have sequential execution of a statement and decision making. But what we have to be avoided in the structured programming, so we have to use more usage of go to statement and also break or continue statement. That all the kind of jump statements we have to minimize usage when we are doing a programming, and also multiple execute pointer function and a procedure or any other subroutine that should be avoided when we are having this structured programming. Why? Because so in this structured programming, it mainly uses a single point entry and exit, so that we have to minimize the multiple entry points to a function or a procedure or any subroutine that needs to be avoided in the structured programming. And also mainly it makes a use of top-down design. So why we are saying this, structured programming is also related to top-down design. Here also it will going to consider that as a modular programming. It will divide the problem into number of subtasks, or program structure is divided into separate subsection, and we can call that subsection as a set of code here. So that defined functions or a set of similar functions is kept separately. It will going to have different libraries and different functions, and each function will going to perform its own task. So for that reason, it is going to follow the top-down approach. And also due to the separation of function, they are easily loaded in the memory. So when we have a different functions, or when we have a separate subroutine for each programming, at the time it will be easy in order to load that function into the computer's main memory. When it is in the memory, then only it will be able to execute. That is what the reason it following this top-down design approach or top-down programming. And as we discussed here, it will going to have a separate functions, right? So that separate functions, whatever we have, can be reused in one or more programs, and each independent module will going to be tested separately, and its implementation, debugging, everything will going to be done individually so that it will be easy. But once we are done with what testing of all the modules or sub function, then that needs to be integrated with other modules in order to achieve the overall program structure. So for example, if I have a module 1 here, module 2 here, module 3 here, so once it got corrected, modified, or any changes whatever we require, if everything is done with the implementation and testing, once it is done, that needs to be integrated in order to make this as a complete program structure. And also mainly you have to consider one thing. So when we have this structured programming, it mainly focuses on the single entry and single exit point. So if I start with the main function, whatever the sub function that we have, everything will going to be inside this main function, and it will going to close the main function scope at last. That is what single entry and single exit point. It should not entertain, or it will not going to entertain the multiple entry point. So that this mainly character implies that during the execution, structured statement starts from one defined point and terminates at another defined point. Whatever the functions we have in between, everything will going to be settled in between the entry point to the exit point. This is the main important characteristics that you can expect in the structured programming. It's all about our today's session. I hope you all understood. So in my coming session, that means up to this session, we have learned how to do the coding, right? So once the coding is done, that needs to be documented. So for that reason, in our coming session, we'll see how this coding documentation of a software engineering will going to takes place. Along with that, we'll see the last more type of programming or a coding, that is information hiding. We'll see in our next class. So let me meet you in the next session. Until that, keep learning, keep on growing. Thank you.